All right, man, peace. So, brothers, it's starting to become more and more popular on the internet and on mainstream television to imply or intimate that Mr. Kyrie Irving, the superstar combo guard formerly of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics, currently with the Brooklyn Nets, may possibly be, quote-unquote, bipolar. I did a couple of videos called Are You an Introvert Volume 2 featuring Kyrie Irving, in which I tried to explain that I do not believe that he's bipolar or suffers from any type of psychological disorder. I believe that he's simply an introvert, as I've already stated. Someone who is to himself in his own world, and that's normally the case, especially for people who are borderline geniuses at what they do or savants at their craft, what they might call a wonderkind, someone who from their birth showed that they had such an expertise in a chosen craft that you knew that not only were they going to become a professional, but that they were going to become one of the greats when their time came. In my view thus far, that's what Kyrie Irving is. I just don't see the bipolar angle. And to be quite frank with you, I think that it's very irresponsible for people to put that type of allegation out into the atmosphere unless you've spoken to friends, family members, significant others, or former significant others. Those are the people who will be able to give an accurate testimony of what someone's psychological disposition is, not someone in the workplace. Because as far as I'm concerned, Kyrie Irving would have been better suited in a singular sport, an individual sport, where he could compete by himself and not have to count on teammates or have to interact with too many people, like tennis, golf, boxing, etc. But he just happens to be gifted in the sport of basketball, which is a team sport. He does not particularly relate well to others, you can tell, because of his interests. But once again, it's just very irresponsible to put out those type of allegations, especially if you only know him in a professional capacity. Because we can make those same statements about Kobe Bryant. We can make those same statements to a degree about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Even to a certain extent, Michael Jordan. These are all players, professionals, stars, superstars, who like to be to themselves sometimes. Other times, they like to be around people. They're more congenial. Michael Jordan can be very gregarious, but he's also someone who likes to be by himself, especially recently. That doesn't make you bipolar. All that means is that you know who you are, and you know that you don't fit in well with the average person. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, as of right now, there are starting to be rumblings that certain higher ups associated with the Brooklyn Nets, maybe even teammates, are starting to put out there for public consumption that Kyrie Irving is quote unquote moody in the locker room. I'm not quite sure. Once again, I'm not quite sure who's making those statements or trying to imply those things. But Stephen A. Smith reported on it a few days ago. And now they're doing a follow-up report on Kyrie Irving, especially in light of the interview that Danny Ainge gave to Rachel Nichols, in which he stated, he pretty much confirmed that there were chemistry issues in the locker room, which I was noting from the very beginning. There were going to be chemistry issues because Danny Ainge, as he himself admitted, he staffed the team wrong. The roster was not built in the correct way. They had too many of the same type of players. And if the coach is not going to tell the other players that Kyrie is the superstar and everything goes through him, now you're leaving it to an introvert to have to tell other players on the squad who are competing with him for a certain level of prominence that, no, I'm that guy and you guys have to know your place. And of course, it's going to become awkward, as we saw last season. So I'm not going to put it all on Kyrie. As of right now, in my view, Kyrie's just an introvert who was not built to be a leader, which is very strange because he's supposed to be the point guard. Once again, I don't think that Kyrie is long for the NBA. I think that he's going to be out by 33, 34 years old, not much older than that. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
I think that in hindsight, wish I would have cleaned out the roster a little bit to make it easier for Brad, more joy for him to coach. And it just didn't mesh. It just didn't. And I knew, and we talked about it. Anyway, I think it's silly that Kyrie is targeted as a guy just because he's not with us this year.
Bullshit. Danny Ainge knows damn well that if Jackie McMullen is saying certain things, it's because he's giving her the information. That's known as the art of public relations. You have certain plants in the media that you give personal or private information to, certain information that you want to have dispensed to the public so that you can seem to be the quote-unquote good guy. Then you get on camera and act as if you have no idea what's going on. You're going to place a certain amount of blame on yourself. No, it's not him, it's me. It's all a bunch of bullshit.
One player's fault. I'll blame all the players, and I'll blame myself, and we'll go from there.
Well, you should partially blame yourself because, as I stated from the beginning of last year, Before the 2018-2019 season, I did a video telling you brothers that the Boston Celtics were going to have chemistry issues because they had too many of the same type of players on their roster. And coming off of their playoff run in 2018, you're going to have a bunch of young dudes who thought that they should be the guy, especially with the media putting out all these notions about Jason Tatum. Should he be the number one option? Guys like Shannon Sharp, Max Kellerman, who had a gripe with Kyrie for leaving LeBron, were putting out those type of energies to try to foment issues in the locker room that manifested themselves. So that shows you the power of the media. And of course, Kyrie Irving did himself no favors by trying to play those low-level mind games.
That was Celtics GM Danny Ainge stepping up to shoulder some of the blame after last season ended in a disappointing second-round finish and finger-pointing. Then Marcus Smart addressed questions about Kyrie Irving's impact on the team last year, and he said, quote, "It's not that we didn't know how to act around him. It's that we didn't know how he was going to act. We didn't know what his moods were, and we didn't know what Kyrie was going through."
Once again, what this brother Marcus Smart is saying here does not make Kyrie Irving bipolar. I would like to hear what his sister has to say, what his father has to say. I'm talking about Kyrie Irving's sister and father. What his former significant others would have to say about him, or what his current significant other would have to say about him in order to determine whether or not he might possibly be bipolar. That is a very serious allegation. When someone is bipolar, there could be some possible murderous intent depending on the level of their mood. Kyrie Irving comes off to me more as a dude who becomes extremely frustrated when he's in an environment that he believes has players on his squad who do not have the basketball IQ that he has. So he's kind of a basketball elitist. That's why he communicates so much with a Kobe Bean Bryant. Hopefully for him, he'll find a location and environment that he feels comfortable in. Hopefully for him, that place is Brooklyn.
So, fair or not, guys, Kyrie Irving left Boston with a stench to him. The murmurs, true or not, insinuated that he was a problematic leader. And so Kyrie has since departed for the Brooklyn Nets. And despite losing Kyrie, this all-NBA talent, this season's Celtics are second in the East. They're 12-4 on the season so far. And if you look closely, dare I say, the Celtics look like they're having fun. So, Stephen A., does this season prove that Kyrie was the problem?
No.
Well, actually, I think that it does. For the Boston Celtics, I believe that it does prove that Kyrie Irving was the problem, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you could be in a relationship with someone and you guys just don't mesh. You don't fit well together. You don't belong together. And just because you break up and that female goes off and you go off into your own path on your own journey and you become happier with someone else, quote unquote, and she becomes happier with someone else, it doesn't mean that it was any one person's particular fault. It just means that you did not mesh well together. Once again, Kyrie Irving was traded to Boston. He did not choose to go there. He tried to make the best of a bad situation, and he was guilty of something that many people tried to do, and it always ends up blowing up in their face, and that's being too positive for the environment. Sometimes you have to understand when you need to be positive and when you need to be reticent, meaning when you need to keep your damn mouth closed. He decided that he was going to promise to the Boston fans that he was going to resign there. I think that he did that as a political ploy to warn some of the other players in the Boston Celtics, I'm not going anywhere, so don't even try to act like you're the alpha this year. That may have been his first attempt at a mind game on his teammates, because as Spencer Dinwiddie stated, Kyrie was talking to him last December about coming to the Brooklyn Nets. So it was very clear that Kyrie Irving never truly planned to stay in Boston unless they won a championship. They didn't win a championship, and not only that, they had very intense chemistry issues in the locker room. So that was his main problem. He made a promise that he should not have made.
It does, and I don't think that it's his situation is being depicted fairly, and I've stated that, and I'll continue to state that.
Well, most introverts do not get treated fairly. That's a part of life. You have to deal with that.
If we're asking a question, is there problems with Kyrie Irving's version of leadership? Absolutely. I'm not disputing that. And I'll leave that to Max to touch on. There's no question about that. But to act like that was the problem in Cleveland, to act like that was the problem in Boston is where I raise up and I say, nah. Now, I'm not going to get into people's business. That's not my style. What I would tell you is that he was done dirty in Cleveland. They know what I'm talking about. We gonna leave it at that. He was.
Well, I have a question for you, Stephen A. Smith. It's pretty much been dispensed for the public that there were issues that Kyrie Irving had with the Cleveland Cavaliers front office because they tried to trade him to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Eric Bledsoe, and I also believe Paul George was going to go back to Cleveland. And LeBron James had signed off on that trade. The public already knows that. So what is it that you're referring to that you're saying you're going to, quote unquote, leave it at that and not tell the people exactly why Kyrie Irving felt like he was done dirty in Cleveland? What went on in the locker room? Because Stephen A. Smith and also Max Kellerman have implied or intimated, thrown certain things out in the past about there being an issue between Kyrie and LeBron over something personal that occurred, which obvious to me had to have involved a woman. I'm just putting that out there, but Stephen A. Smith is putting something out there as well, so I have to pick up what he's putting down.
Dirty. And if the kind of stuff that happened to him, had happened to other people, they would have reacted in similar fashion. He transitions to Boston. Here's what happens in Boston, and Max and I have been known to disagree on this point. I make the contention that Gordon Hayward being inserted into the starting lineup was the death knell to that organization last season. In fairness to Brad Stevens, who I'm very fond of, and in fairness to Danny Ainge, who I respect profoundly, and he and I have spoken, and we respectfully disagree, but I make my position very, very clear. Brad Stevens coached Gordon Hayward at Butler. That was his star. That man was not ready. I like Gordon Hayward. I'm proud that when he gets healthy, he's on the floor, that brother could play. But he was not healthy. And he was getting waxed in practice. He wasn't ready. And to take that guy and to insert him into the starting lineup, and I'm going to go here, Max, in a league that's more than 75% black, with a bunch of brothers who can ball, who are looking for their moment to shine, particularly fresh coming off an Eastern Conference Game 7 Finals berth.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, I have to stop you there because you're someone who tends to take the pragmatic approach to arguments. And to a degree, the argument that you're trying to make right now is pragmatic. But number one, before the NBA is entertainment, it's a business. And we know that they signed Gordon Hayward to a huge contract. And both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, even though they're more athletic than Gordon Hayward and certainly were better players than him last season, Danny Ainge's mentality is we need to get everything that we've put into Gordon Hayward out of him because we made an investment into him. Even though he shattered his leg last season, we're going to play him as many minutes as possible so that we can get as much out of our investment as we can. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to be here for a few years. We can appease them later. So I believe that was the mentality, that was the thought process behind why they played Gordon Hayward so many minutes and started him over Jaylen Brown. But I do agree with you. That was an early death knell for the Boston Celtics.
Without Kyrie, to follow up that season by inserting an unready Gordon Hayward into the starting lineup was the beginning of everything.
What about the politics of how much he was being paid, too? Sometimes that factors in as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roscoe.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying
it's purely
I'm not saying that's
racial or relationship-wise. It's based on everything. That was the contract.
It wasn't based. Okay. The decision wasn't based on race.
The decision to play him.
The brothers, they had a problem with that.
All right, look.
So the Kyrie element was
Here's the problem. Here's the problem.
That's all I'm saying.
Here's my problem I have with you in this take.
Sure.
Your hypothesis is undisprovable. So what is undisprovable hypothesis? When you can't disprove a hypothesis, that makes it a religious belief. If it can't be disproven, and I'm just saying there's no...
I can't quite go there. As most of us know, Max Kellerman is an atheist. There's this concept pertaining to the quote-unquote belief in the Most High that is undisprovable. It's really not. But, that's really a whole other video for another day. The point being is this: nothing that Stephen A. stated is undisprovable because he's already reported from last season that he was speaking to people within the Boston Celtics franchise that they were upset about what was going on with the playing time. And I even made a video, and of course I don't interview any of these players. I even made many videos stating that it was obvious to me that Jaylen Brown was the player who had many of the issues with what was going on in the locker room, and that he was the person who was acting as the source for some of the more controversial statements about Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, and he basically confirmed it in an appearance that he made on the show The Jump with Rachel Nichols and Scottie Pippen.
Evidence, it seems to me, about Kyrie that will satisfy you that it's his.
Before I let you go on, the only part that I think that's unfair about your characterization is I came on here on First Take before we even got into a conversation about Kyrie Irving and told you I had spoken to people, and that's where I got it.
Yeah, I understand.
I didn't believe
you
this.
Can
I was told this.
You can
That's why I touched on Max Kellerman being an atheist. Because most atheists lead with their emotions. They try to act as if they're people who deal strictly with substance, but they conveniently forget the substance that does not fit their argument or their contention.
use that evidence and say, well, with the Cavs he was done dirty, and with the Celtics it was Gordon Hayward, and now what is it with the Nets? Because at a certain point you look, there's one consistent character through all this, and that's Kyrie. It's not that he doesn't have a good leadership style, it's that he's not a leader.
I agree with that.
Not a leader. He is the most talented player on the floor. He is an all-time great talent. And by the way, there's a difference between talent and skill. Talent is kind of like what you're capable of doing physically, like in a raw way, before you've refined your craft. Skill is what you learn to do with that talent. It's not just that Kyrie is a crazy talent. He's the most skillful player you will ever see. The talent plus the skill.
Well, I agree with that partially. When it comes to his skill level offensively, he has everything in his bag. His bag is as filled as any player in the history of the NBA. He's up there with the Kobe's and the Jordans when it comes to his skill set offensively. There's no doubt about that.
The knowledge of how and when to deploy it, the leadership in the locker room, all those things, it's not happening. And worse than that, we keep hearing the same thing. They call it mood swings. Whatever it is, Kyrie has had a deleterious effect in the locker room on 3 teams now.
We could say the same thing about Kareem. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was also accused of being quote-unquote moody until Magic Johnson came onto the squad. You cannot really ask an introvert to be the leader of a team of people that are, no disrespect, low-level thinkers or basic people. An introvert normally, once again, they go according to their own path. They don't really like to be bothered. And in order to establish a bridge with them or to be able to pontificate with them, they have to realize that you have similar interests and that you're someone who can be trusted. Kyrie Irving is a person, at least to me, seemingly, that any rapport or relationship that he has with another person has to be something of depth. It's not going to be something cursory or frivolous. He's not going to indulge in anything like that if he can avoid it. He has other interests. So, as we can see here, Max Kellerman is trying to imply that Kyrie Irving is bipolar or that he has psychological disorders. And as we can see by some of the sound effects that Roz Gold on Woody is making and the facial expressions that she's making, she seems to adhere to that as well. But we also have to understand that's the combination of the so-called black woman and the so-called Caucasian man or so-called Caucasian Jew coming together. So you can only take what they have to say, but so seriously.
And you talk about Gordon Hayward all you want. I understand circumstances have shifted.
At the time.
I don't. This
now.
year, when they inserted Gordon Hayward in the starting lineup, everyone was fine. Now that he's out of the starting lineup, everyone's still fine. Like, this is, as you mentioned, Ross, a happy team that shares the ball.
Right, but let's understand something. Whenever 2 people break up, the woman is going to act as if whichever man she chooses to allow to penetrate her after the breakup of her previous boyfriend is the best guy ever. He makes so much money. He's so smart. He's the greatest in bed. But that's part of the euphoria of the rebound. After a while, we're going to start to see certain things. I'm not going to say that Boston's going to go down the drain. But Kemba Walker, make no mistake about it, is a better fit for their team. But that does not mean that their ceiling is any higher with Kemba Walker than it was with Kyrie. Maybe it is. We'll find out. We never truly got a chance to see how potent Kyrie and that squad could be when they were functional, because they were far more functional as a team in the 2017-2018 season before Kyrie got hurt than they were in 2018-2019 when all the young guys thought that they were better than Kyrie. So, I mean, we never truly got to see them at their best. And like I was saying, when you see an appraisal of a so-called black man by a liberal black female, and a liberal Caucasian man or a liberal Caucasian Jewish man. You have to take what they say with a grain of salt, because the one thing that those two demographics have in common is their lack of respect for the mental component of the so-called black man.
And everyone seems to be okay with and without Gordon Hayward. So I'm just isolating variables here. Is it Gordon Hayward? No, it's not that. Is it Ainge? No, he was there too. Is it Coach? No. Who is it? Kyrie? Oh, that's interesting, because I see the same thing in Brooklyn. I see the same thing with the Cavs.
And my retort to that would be, I have no explanation other than to lean on what you're saying as it pertains to Brooklyn. I know what happened in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I know what happened in Boston prior to Kyrie going through what he was going through on a personal level. I'm saying there are things that happened prior to that that led to the kind of mood that we're talking about and the kind of effect that it had on other people.
In other words, what Stephen A. Smith is trying to say or trying to convey is that we have to have respect for Kyrie as a human being. Before we start throwing all these notions out there that he's bipolar, next he's going to be a schizophrenic, we have to grasp the gravity of those type of statements, those type of allegations or allusions. Please, we have to be very responsible. I want to hear Kyrie Irving's sister say that. I want to hear his father say that yes, Kyrie is someone who we've always thought was bipolar. But when someone is bipolar, that means that one day they're super happy and jovial, and the next day they might be willing to kill someone. Like there's great severity in that analysis, in that diagnosis, whatever term you want to use.
That's what I'm saying.
To me, what you're saying seems to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Cleveland, there's good reason for Kyrie to behave that way. In Boston, it really wasn't on Kyrie. You and I just disagree with that, right? But to me, it's still excuses. Like, just because something happened, yeah, it's understandable you behave that way, but you didn't have to behave that way. In Boston,
okay, that's a different argument. I'm not excusing it. So I get where you're coming from. If you're telling me that it's excused, then I'll correct myself. Because again, regardless of those situations, obviously that doesn't mean that it gives you a license to act up with the mood swings that has a negative effect on your teammate. I'm with you there. What I'm saying is,
we have to make those same statements about Kobe Bryant back in the mid-2000s. We have to make those same statements about KD just a couple of years ago, including last season with the Golden State Warriors. We have to make those same statements about Kareem throughout the mid-1970s, even going into the 1980s. It's just that Magic Johnson covered up for a lot of the issues that players may have had with Kareem in the locker room. But there have always been great and brilliant NBA players who one could claim were quote-unquote bipolar if you did not like them. But if you understood them, I mean, they're just people in life that you encounter that you say, okay, that person likes to be by themselves. They like to be meditative or contemplative or what have you. That's why we have the term known as empathy. Sometimes you have to be more understanding of other people so that you can dwell with them in an environment. The problem with Kyrie, though, is that Kyrie is aspiring to be a leader. You cannot be a leader and not be able to moderate whatever your mood fluctuations are. You have to make sure that you can moderate that. And he's doing a very poor job of that thus far.
Not going to do is look at Kyrie and then say it's all you and these other things didn't happen to contribute to you being that way, because that's not fair. That's what I'm saying. There was stuff that happened in Cleveland, there was stuff that happened in Boston that led to that negative impact.
But if it happens in Brooklyn and it happens at the next stop, at a certain point you go back and you have to reevaluate what's going on.
Brooklyn's a different ballgame.
Okay.
They signed you to a max contract. You came there with
real quick, I want to say one thing to Kyrie.
Sure.
I want to say it right to Kyrie.
Sure.
And by the way, when I was his age, I was not, he's world famous. I can't exactly imagine what he goes through at his age and everything. I'm not pretending to.
Sure.
And they say youth is wasted on the young. Whatever it is, if there's something going on that he needs to handle or get right, this career of yours, this physical prime, it does not last very long. And you are operating on a level almost no one's ever operated on physically on the court. It would be a shame if there's other stuff going on that is negatively affecting that. I'm hoping that if that's the case, he gets it together.
All right.
That should be the closing mark. That's very astute on Max's part. That's a good thing to say.
It's very obvious that Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith are aware of something that the public is not aware of when it comes to Kyrie Irving. just for him to basically make that public service announcement directly to Kyrie. They understand that he is an ethereal level talent, and they're aware of something. They know something about what's going on in Kyrie's personal life, and they're asking him to get it together so that he does not ruin his career because of his entertainment value. But anyway, either way, once again, we'll see what happens with Kyrie. Hopefully, he's able to button it up and quiet a lot of the innuendos about him, because he is an all-time great, skilled basketball player. So peace.